The area you're in is called the Kanyataba contract area, and it covers an area of 344 square kilometers. This contract area was awarded to Ama Energy Limited.
Ama Energy is a junior explorer and production company. So we produce gas and oil in Queensland, and we have exploration licenses around Australia from the Northern Territory to Northern Queensland. We work with conventional and tight gas, and we have some shale gas opportunities as well.
We got the license on 14th September 2017, and as you know, the exploration process is incremental. So we started with analyzing the soil samples all over the block, over 344 square kilometers of Kanyataba contract area. We selected the samples and took them to a lab in Canada where we analyzed them. And then when we also found that identifying the presence of iodine in different locations along the seismic lines was also going to give us a good result, we also took samples, an additional set of samples which we took to the United States.
They explained to us that they would be here for 3 months, basically doing data collection.
The company has a minimum work program that it's supposed to meet, and one of the activities is to acquire 100 kilometer 2D seismic. And the activity that you see ongoing right now is that particular acquisition of that data.
Well, the 2D data acquisition it's a critical component of understanding your basin, and in particularly in the Albertine Graben. Most of the discoveries have been made on 2D seismic data acquisition from Kingfisher to the north.
The main activities are really surveying to ensure that you are carrying out investigations in the right location. We then, after that, have to clear the line to create access for all the drill rigs that are going to drill the short points that in which we are going to insert the dynamite for the shooting and recording phase.
So the role of the PAU, we are responsible for monitoring the exploration, production and development, which are the upstream segments of the oil and gas industry, as well as gas conversion, transportation and storage, which are part of the midstream segment.
Well, the community leaders have been excellent in assisting us with mobilization and sensitization of the local communities. And we've included at least 75 local community members in the project, which have been involved in all aspects of the project, from line clearing to surveying to the shooting team to the camp maintenance, and yeah, they've been well integrated, and over 96% of our camp is actually from the local community areas and Ugandan personnel. So we've integrated them as best we could.
When we did the procurement, first of all, for the environmental and social impact assessment, we got a suitable Ugandan company to do the job, and they did it, and NEMA approved for the soil sampling and now for the seismic. Then secondly, for the seismic acquisition, we put out a bid, and the successful company was Ugandan. And we were very much keen on having a Ugandan company.
Well, Tech Lab Limited is a geosciences company that has been offering geotechnical and geophysical investigation services to the East African market. We put together a winning bid and became the first Ugandan company to provide seismic services under an oil and gas contract in Uganda.
The oil and gas exploration which is ongoing has had a great impact to our people, because one, people have expectations that if oil is discovered in this district, the economic operation will rise, people will have income, and social services will improve, and infrastructure services. So our people have expectation. People are making money because those who are helping in the exploration, we agreed that they use the indigenous. Now where AMA Energy is now in Kanara Town Council, people are making money because they are moving with them in the field to do the exploration.
Our produce has been purchased for use there because we were told to provide goats, and other things. So the purchasing has been done locally here. They have a logistics company from the locals here, things to use. So we can say our people are getting some income.
Project nyowe nkanya nko muntu nyene kinzigoberema uko ntuzire embuzi zanje tuzire embuzi kunganingana nka 10 so nisima company MSA na company abandi abamaguta abandi abanyakwizire nabo unda kwagera company iyi so nyowe nkanya nko muntu nzigoboroweremo.
Well, oil and gas is relatively a new sector in Uganda, and therefore it's reasonable to assume that there is a general lack of skill to perform in this sector at the required level. My advice to Ugandan local contractors is to form strategic partnerships with foreign firms with an objective of learning to acquire the relevant skills to perform in the oil and gas sector in Uganda.
Ugandans need to understand that opportunity, information, independence, and power, those 4 things are never given. You have to find them and take them. Information about this industry is there. Petroleum Authority, I don't know what more you can do to provide information. It is all over the place. Now, if people do not go and find that information and use it to do business, there's nothing more you're going to do. So that's my quarrel really with Ugandans. Go get the information, see how to use it.
There's been no seismic acquisition in them before, so you're really at the early stage of understanding in those areas, and we're quite excited to see what comes up.
The event that the company is able to discover hydrocarbons within this area, then our reserves will also increase. And what you have seen happening at Kingfisher, Tilenga will also start happening within the Semiliki area. But for now, we are still at that phase where we need to first confirm whether hydrocarbons exist within this basin.
Being on the border, as I mentioned, I have seen in Toroko now, we have the game reserve, we have River Semiliki in the west, we have Lake Albert in the north, we have Rwenzori Mountains in the south. So it makes it a unique area.
We are partnering and working in hand with the Uganda Wildlife Authority. We have the rangers on the team who have been very supportive towards these particular operations. They are able to guide us on how to work safely in these environments, and that is one of the measures that we have implemented. And the second environment aspect that we are doing is we enforce health, safety, and environmental procedures onto the ongoing operations. That what I mean by that is that we ensure that the operations that are ongoing are done in a safe space.
We have faced a number of challenges on this project, but with AMA, we have felt like we have been partners on this project. The challenges have been caused by the weather, which has caused the site to flood, and of course the COVID-19 pandemic.
I have seen our roads. Our roads are very poor. Some of them are impassable. Like now, AMA Energy has to travel from Kanara via Kakara, via Rwesengo, up to Kachwenkum to do when there's a nearby road from Kanara to Kachwenkum, but it's impossible now because it's raining.
We're very excited to be progressing the project, and I personally have had a very positive experience here in Uganda. The people are wonderful, and I can't wait to get back again in the near future.
The area
Yeah, so is that okay? We can start now? Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Fourth Estate. My name is Ernest Rubondo. I'm the Executive Director of the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, and I would like to welcome everybody here and those online for this annual media briefing of the Petroleum Authority of Uganda for the year 2022. This briefing will focus on the milestones achieved in regulating Uganda's oil and gas sector during the years 2020 and 2021. The authority was not able to hold a briefing at the beginning of 2021 because of the circumstances that most of us are aware of. I'm glad to say that Uganda's oil and gas sector progressed very successfully and registered critical and important milestones during the 2 years of 2020 and 2021. This, as many of you are aware, was despite the COVID-19 pandemic and its resulting impacts, which ravaged not only Uganda and the world during these 2 years. The most important milestones achieved in the country's oil and gas sector included conclusion of the agreements which were required to take forward the oil projects in the country. And these included the East African Crude Oil Pipeline Project, ECOP, and this was in September 2020. The second milestone was the launching of Uganda's oil and gas projects in April 2021, and it's important to be aware that this is one of the few projects in oil and gas around the world to be sanctioned during this period because of the COVID effect and also the fact that the world is slowing down on fossil fuels. The other one we are aware of is the Mozambique liquefied natural gas project, which was launched in November 2019. It had some challenges, but we understand now that the investors are taking it forward. The third milestone and achievement was that the Parliament of Uganda passed the critical pieces of legislation which are required to take forward the development of the country's oil and gas sector. These pieces of legislation are the East African Crude Oil Pipeline Special Provisions Bill 2021, the Income Tax Amendment Bill, and the Public Finance Management Act Amendment Bill of 2021. These bills were passed by Parliament during November and December 2021. The fourth milestone is that the National Environment Management Authority, NEMA, awarded the Environment and Social Impact Assessment certificates for the Kingfisher and the East African Crude Oil Pipeline projects. This was in April 2019 and in March 2020, and in December 2020 respectively. Now this followed the award of the Environment and Social Impact Assessment for the Tilenga project, which NEMA had granted in April 2019. Now investments in the oil and gas sector in the country totaled to $230 million in the year 2019. This investment amount went down in the year 2020 to United States dollars 180 million. This may sound small, but it is significant, bearing in mind that 2020 was a very difficult year in aspects of investment. What is important to note is that in the year 2021, investments in the oil and gas sector in the country increased to just over United States dollars 500 million. Now these investments are expected to increase to about $3 billion in 2022. This is a very significant amount to be invested in one sector in 1 year because, as many of you would know, the total amount of investment the country has been getting over the last few years has been fluctuating around below to just above $1 billion. The fifth milestone was that the process of acquiring land for setting up the infrastructure required for the production, processing, and transportation of oil in the country continued and progressed very significantly in the years 2020-21. Sixthly, I would like to say that many more Ugandans are now directly and indirectly employed in the country's oil and gas sector. Ugandans and Ugandan enterprises are also taking up the big and lucrative opportunities to provide goods and services in the sector. The Petroleum Authority of Uganda, as some of you would remember, marked 5 years of existence in October 2020. The first 5 years of the authority were quite challenging, but they were also interesting at the same time. They were challenging because the authority had to build itself from scratch, while at the same time carrying out the very significant task of monitoring and regulating the country's oil and gas sector. The 5 years were very interesting because of the opportunity the authority has had to contribute to and participate in the developments of this very important sector to the country. The authority has also been able to engage its diverse stakeholders who are very interesting. And most importantly, the authority has seen the beginning of the contribution of the oil and gas sector towards developing and transforming the country in the short, medium, and long term. As you may be aware, governance of an institution is very important. And in terms of governance, the Minister of Energy and Mineral Development continues to provide policy direction required for the Petroleum Authority of Uganda to take forward its work. The Petroleum Authority of Uganda also has a board of directors who continue to provide oversight. I'm sorry to say the authority regrettably lost one member of its board in July 2021. This was the late Dr. Noble Ephraim Banada, and we pray that his soul, may the Lord rest his soul in peace. On another note, one member of the board, Mr. Chiriwa Chiwanuka, was appointed Attorney General in July 2021, and this was an achievement for him, and we congratulate him and pray for him. Now, the board has and continues to play a significant role in building the firm foundation which is required for the authority to implement its mandate. In addition to the policy and oversight aspects, the authority has a largely young and very vibrant staff of 190, and this was at the end of 2021. These staff, whose numbers are expected to grow over the next few years, are really the authority's biggest asset, as they are the heartbeat of its output and its performance. These staff are well distributed across the generations, with 68% of them being in the Generation Y, or called millennials. And this generation distribution is more like the distribution within the country. Of course, we don't have a lot of Generation Zs, but I think you're aware that's because most of them are not yet working age. These staff are continuing to deliver the PAU's mission of ensuring that the sector creates lasting value to society and contributes to Uganda being a sound investment destination. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to present a summary of the specific milestones which the PAU achieved during 2020 and 2021, together with the outlook for 2022. The PAU, as you know, carries out its regulatory function through the 7 areas of resource management. These 7 areas have been flashed on the screen, and I hope you can see them. These areas are resource management as one of them, commercialization of the resources, cost management and economic analysis, management of petroleum and related data, environment, health, safety, and social management, participation of Ugandans and Ugandan enterprises, which is known as national content, and also stakeholder management. Those are the 7 areas, and you can see them shown on the screen. Before I go into the specific aspects of these regulatory areas, I would just like to say that the entities being regulated by the Petroleum Authority of Uganda include those which are licensed to undertake petroleum exploration, and you can see them on the left of the screen. And these currently include Ama Energy, Oranto Petroleum, and of course the Uganda National Oil Company. These are licensed to undertake exploration. The authority also regulates the companies that are licensed to prepare and produce petroleum in the country. And currently these include Total, CNOOC, and again the Uganda National Oil Company, as you can see them on the screen. The authority also regulates the companies that are developing and will manage the infrastructure to commercialize the oil and gas resources which are going to be produced in the country. These, of course, for the pipeline, you have again Total, UNOC, CNOOC, Tanzania Petroleum Development Corporation, and then for the refinery, you have the Albertine Graben Refinery Consortium, which is also working with the Uganda National Oil Company. So those are the licensees that the Petroleum Authority regulates. Now, in addition to regulating the licensees, the authority also regulates the contractors and the subcontractors to these licensed companies. It's important to note that these companies are significant in size. They bring a lot of skill in the country, and as I'll describe later, they have a lot of value that they're introducing in the economy, even outside just oil and gas. So those are the entities that the authority regulates. Now going on to the regulatory areas, the first one is resource management. The Petroleum Authority of Uganda works with the oil companies which are licensed to undertake petroleum exploration and production in the country to study the discovered oil and gas fields. These studies are done with a view to estimate the country's petroleum resource volumes and also implement the methods required to achieve optimal recovery of these resources from the ground. We would like to get as much as possible from the ground, and this is an effort. It doesn't come by accident. Now, in this regard, the Petroleum Authority prepared the country's 5th and 6th annual resource reports for the years 2020 and 2021 as required by legislation, and these reports were submitted to the minister. These reports are based on the authority's interpretation of data and assessment of reports submitted by the licensed oil companies, as well as the technical studies that have been carried out since 2016. Uganda's petroleum resources remain at 6.5 billion barrels of oil equivalent in place, with about 1.4 billion barrels of this as recoverable resources. It's important to recognize that nowhere in the world do you recover everything that is in the ground. These resources, which have been discovered in the country to date, you can say they do not represent very large volumes of petroleum, especially when you compare them to the resources and reserves of other petroleum producing countries. The graph there shows you the large producers in the country, in the world, and you can see where Uganda falls. These resources, much as they may look small compared to those large producers, are a very good beginning for the country because they will enable production of over 200,000 barrels of crude oil per day for the country. And it is also important to note that these resources are in only about 15% of the Albertine Graben, which is currently licensed. There is therefore potential for more oil to be discovered in the country. These resource volumes are expected to increase, especially if the ongoing exploration work, which is being undertaken by Oranto Petroleum and Ama Energy in the Ngasa and Kanyuataba contract areas, respectively, and the licensing of additional areas for petroleum exploration in the country, which is being taken forward by the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, are successful. So there is opportunity for the country to get more resources from the work of Oranto and Ama Energy, but there is also opportunity for the country to get more resources from the areas that the ministry is currently licensing out to companies to do exploration. Now, the companies which are licensed for exploration are continuing to implement their agreed work, and this includes acquisition of 108 line kilometers of seismic data by Ama Energy in the Kanyuataba exploration area, and it also includes the development of a drilling solution for the Ngasa exploration area by Oranto Petroleum Limited. This one of 3 drillable prospects in the Kanyuataba area and 2 drillable prospects in the Ngasa area. The next stage of exploration in the country, in both Kanyuataba and Ngasa, are there for the drilling of exploration wells. Now, preparation for drilling of wells in these 2 areas is ongoing, and therefore petroleum exploration wells are expected to be drilled in these areas during the current licensing period, which will expire during 2023. The authority, of course, continued to engage with the oil companies which are licensed for production of oil in the Tilenga and Kingfisher areas, and I know this is the area most people are interested in, on the planning for the development of the projects. The plans for the production of oil in Kingfisher and Tilenga include production of over 1 billion barrels of crude oil from both Tilenga and Kingfisher over a period of 25 years, out of which the Tilenga project is expected to produce a total of 874 million barrels of oil at peak production of 190,000 barrels per day. You can see on the graph there in the yellow, that's the expected production from the Tilenga project. And this oil is supposed to come from 7 oil fields at the beginning of the oil production, But there are 3 additional oil fields which will come on stream after 5 years. And these additional fields which will come on stream after 5 years will contribute to maintaining the peak of production over a longer period, and they'll also enable a gentler decline in the production of oil from these oil fields. Now, following the launch of the oil projects in April 2021, the licensed oil companies have concluded the procurement process, and the following contracts have been granted for the Tilenga and Kingfisher projects. The Tilenga project, main engineering and construction commissioning contract, was awarded to a consortium of McDermott and Sinopec, and these 2 companies have commenced work on the ground. They are currently taking forward the detailed engineering and other activities in London, UK and Beijing, the planning, and in India. In addition, the following 10 contracts for drilling and management of wells in the Tilenga project has been awarded by Total, who is the operator of that project. These include the Chinese ZPEP Uganda company, who won the contract for constructing the drilling rigs. They are currently making those drilling rigs, and the detailed design of these drilling rigs has commenced. These rigs will be used to drill up to over 400 wells, which are scheduled to be commenced drilling in the last quarter of this year. The other contracts awarded for drilling are directional drilling, drill bits and real time, and this was awarded to Shlambaja. The 3rd contract is electric logging, which was awarded to China Oil Services Limited. And the 5th is a wellheads and Xmas tree contract, which was also awarded to Shlambaja. Then there is the lower completion, which was also awarded to Shlambaja. Upper completion, or artificial lift, also to Shlambaja. These are significant contracts ranging between tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. And you'll appreciate that in our country, contracts that size are not common. And this gives you an example of how the sector is really picking up in the country. Now, the contract for civil works to prepare the over 700 acres of industrial area for the Tilenga project was awarded to Motenjo, Uganda. I think many of you know Motenjo. They are the ones who have been doing the northern bypass. Everybody expects them to be faster this time. Now, these works that they have undertaken so far include bush clearing, fencing, construction, drainage, and internal roads. Now, you can see on the slide there the work that has already commenced on site clearance of the Tilenga industrial area. And the other slide is showing you what is expected when the Kingfisher industrial area is also completed. The facilities to be hosted in the industrial area for Tilenga include the central processing facility, construction camps, drilling support bases, operational support bases, among others. It's also important to note that Motenjo, Uganda, which won this contract of preparing that industrial site, has subcontracted various Ugandan companies, including Gulf Consultants, Brand Engineering, Civitech, Fabrication Systems, among others, to undertake some of these works. So these are opportunities for these companies, and they are now taking them forward. Now, preparation of the Tilenga industrial site by Motenjo was at about 35% at the end of 2021, and this is expected to be completed by 2022, because remember, the assignment is just to prepare the area, and then the equipment is brought in. Now, a contract for the construction of pads on which the wells for the Tilenga project will be drilled was awarded again to Motenjo. This contract includes preparation of 31 well pad sites, installation of conductor pipes, and construction of well cellars, among others. The picture on the slide there is just showing you a plan of a well pad. Many wells are drilled from a well pad, and then they go underground into different destinations. The reason that is being done is to try and conserve the biodiversity so that you don't drill too many wells in different places. This is a much healthier way of drilling and much more desirable. The work is expected to commence in the first quarter of 2022 in preparation for commencement of drilling in the last quarter of 2022. Now, a contract for civil works and construction of well pads, 3 well pads in the Kingfisher project, together with construction of infield access roads, was awarded to Excel Construction Limited. Excel is also a Ugandan company, as you know. And additional contracts for Kingfisher project, including drilling and well services, are due to be awarded in 2022. It is these contracts that are going to kickstart the work in the country. Now, a contract to design and construct a permanent camp, supply base, safety, security check, also for the Kingfisher project, was awarded to China State Construction Engineering Corporation. You will note that some of the companies which have been awarded those contracts in the Tier 1 include some of the biggest and well-established engineering companies in the world. And this is a big privilege for the country to have these. They also have, these companies have significant capital bases, they have enormous experience, and you'll appreciate that this is very good for the country, because we've been trying to attract people like this in the country. Now they are here, and so the country can see what to do with them as they do the construction for the oil and gas. Going on to the second regulatory area of facilitating commercialization of the discovered resources, you probably already know that Uganda's strategy for commercializing the discovered resources was agreed with the companies in 2014. The commercialization is through a refinery and an export pipeline. The Petroleum Authority of Uganda monitors and regulates the construction, the operation, and maintenance of projects for commercializing the country's oil and gas resources. These projects include the refinery project and the East African crude oil pipeline. In this regard, the Petroleum Authority of Uganda reviewed the plans and designs for metering and measurement of petroleum from the country's oil and gas fields. And these metering methods were proposed by the licensed oil companies. Now, this is in an effort to reduce the uncertainty levels in metering, because as many of you will expect, in the metering is where the value is. Now, the authority also approved the route and the front-end engineering and design for the East African crude oil pipeline, and this was in October 2020. On the slide there, you can see the route of the East African crude oil pipeline. You can also see the ladies and gentlemen beginning to survey that route, and this is being done both in Uganda and in Tanzania. Now, in evaluating the suitability of this route, the authority considered the technical, the environmental, the social acceptability, and the integrity of the facilities that were going to be put in place. And this is with a view to oversee the timely, optimal, and sustainable development of these projects. The authority also supported the negotiations of the legal and commercial agreements which were required for commercializing Uganda's oil and gas resources, which were concluded in April 2021 by launching the projects. These agreements provided a basis for the drafting and discussions on the ECOP bill, which Parliament passed on in December 2021, as I earlier indicated. The pictures there on the slide show you the celebratory moments when these agreements were concluded and they were being endorsed in State House Entebbe. Now, the legislation that is being put in place will facilitate implementation of the East African crude oil project and is a welcome addition to the already attractive regulatory framework for Uganda's oil and gas sector. It's also important to note that the Petroleum Authority of Uganda has entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Energy, Water and Utilities Regulatory Authority of Tanzania, and this was in 2020. This authority of Tanzania is carrying out the role of the PAU on the pipeline over the regulation. So this MOU will facilitate a harmonized cross-border regulation of the activities of the East African crude oil pipeline. The authority is also supporting the discussions on the implementation and shareholders agreement, together with the crude supply agreement for the Uganda refinery project, and these agreements will be executed by the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development and the Alberton Graben Refinery Consortium, which is taking forward the development of a greenfield refinery in Uganda. The Alberton Graben Refinery Consortium continued to implement the project framework agreement, which it entered into with government during 2018. the consortium commenced an environmental impact assessment study for the refinery during February 2020. This study is being undertaken by a joint venture between DNVCL Consulting, which is a Norwegian company, and Atacama Consulting Limited, a Ugandan company. The authority takes pride in these aspects of Ugandans participating because that contributes to the local content or national content aspirations of the country. The Alberton Graben Refinery Consortium also completed the front-end engineering design for the refinery, and it was submitted to the Petroleum Authority of Uganda towards the end of last year for review before approval. The authority is taking forward this review with a view to conclude it before the end of this month. The third aspect of regulation is the management of costs and economic analysis. Costs have to be managed so that when it comes to selling oil, the country's earnings are not undermined, because if the costs are high, the companies have to recover their costs before we start sharing the oil. The Petroleum Authority of Uganda regulates costs in the oil and gas sector, and it undertakes economic analysis of the different projects with a view to ensuring that government of Uganda's take from the oil and gas resources is not eroded in any way, and that the profitability of these projects is maintained. In cost management, the Petroleum Authority reviews and approves the licensee's annual budgets. The authority monitors implementation of the approved budgets, including the procurement processes, which are undertaken by the licensees. The authority also supports the Office of the Auditor General in auditing the actual expenditure after the money has been spent before the final recoverable costs are confirmed. It is important to remember that the cost of finding oil in Uganda is less than $1 per barrel compared to the international $5 to $20 per barrel. Uganda has one of the lowest costs of finding oil in the world, and this low cost was arrived at partly as a result of optimal regulation of costs in the sector to date, and this is one of the factors that have led to this success. Efforts are now being made to achieve similar best practices in regulating the costs for the development of the infrastructure and for the production of oil. The graph on the slides there is a very exciting one, because you can see that previously the amounts of money that have been invested in the sector are shown in blue, but you can see that starting this year, these investments are going to shoot up to about $3 billion. This is very exciting for the country, and as I said, I don't think there is a sector in the economy of this country that is having investments that are even a quarter of that. So this coming from one sector is very attractive, and it's not just for 1 year. You can see it's going to continue into the next 3-4 years, and subsequently will continue in operation and maintenance, albeit at a lower level. Now, following the launch of the projects in April 2021, contracts worth United States dollars $6 billion for over 40 work packages and contracts for the Tilenga and Kingfisher and East African crude oil pipeline projects have been submitted by the licensees to the Petroleum Authority of Uganda for approval before they are awarded. The total budgets approved for all licensees were $180 million from January to December 2020. From January to December 2021, this was $500 million, as I indicated, and this is expected to go to $3 billion for January to December 2022. You will all appreciate that this is a significant growth. This growth in investment in the sector is attributed to the significant increase in the activities in the sector following conclusion of the required agreements and the launch of the projects. Now, in addition to regulating costs, the authority evaluates the economic and financial viability of the upstream and midstream oil projects in the country. And this is done with a view of informing government's planning and decision making. This evaluation is based on the prevailing and anticipated costs of oil, the volumes of oil to be produced, and the crude oil prices, among other variables. Uganda's oil projects remain economically viable in the prevailing crude oil price environment, which is very good, I must say. This is mainly driven by the low cost of finding and developing the resources. The authority estimates that the current project's technical costs are below $20 per barrel, and the break-even price at a 15% discount rate is below $35 per barrel. And this is good for these projects, and they can continue being invested in. Now, in terms of macroeconomic benefits to the country, you are aware that the gross domestic project GDP of Uganda, which was estimated at about $37 billion in the last in the financial year 2020-2021. Now, this GDP is expected to be significantly enhanced by the massive investments anticipated in the sector and through the linkages between the oil and gas and other sectors of the economy like agriculture, tourism, manufacturing, transport, among others. I would like to pause here and just explain to you the benefits of the linkages. As you will appreciate, the oil and gas sector does not work in a vacuum. It has got a very strong linkage with other sectors of the economy, especially those that are shown on the slide: agriculture, health, land use planning, transport, construction, and so on and so on. These linkages have to be studied and taken forward, and they bring benefit to both the oil and gas sector and to those particular sectors specifically. And you find that the harnessing of these linkages is extremely beneficial to the country and can contribute to the growth of the country's GDP by 22% in the next 3 to 4 years of the construction phase. Maybe something that you can imagine yourselves is the linkage between oil and gas and tourism. You can imagine all these ladies and gentlemen who are going to fly into the country to provide the special services that are required. These people will come by air, so the flights that are coming into the country will benefit. They will travel by cars here in Uganda, they will stay in hotels, and so on and so on. These people can also be ambassadors of the beauty of Uganda when they go out there. They will need some bars, they will need restaurants, and things like that. So if that relationship between the oil and gas sector and tourism is very well harnessed, it starts to benefit because these workers will do their work very well because the aspects of hospitality in the country are good, but also that aspect of hospitality will benefit from the extra income. So the authority is working with the other institutions of government and the private sector to harness these linkages so that the country can also benefit from these things. The other area of regulation the authority is taking forward is petroleum data management. Now, in the oil and gas sector, the saying is that a country's petroleum sector is only as good as the quality and availability of its data. Data in the petroleum sector is an asset that is not only used by the authority to perform its regulatory function, but it is also used for investment promotion, taxation, evaluation of recoverable costs, and national planning, among other things. In this regard, the authority is required to regulate the acquisition, processing, interpretation, receipt, archiving, and dissemination of the country's oil and gas data. There is currently over 50 terabytes of electronic oil and gas data, and I don't know how many of you here are IT gurus. That's a lot of data. And there's thousands of physical data, geosamples, under the custody and management of the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. The volume of oil and gas data in the country is expected to increase exponentially during the development phase and subsequently during the production phase. The categories of data currently under the Petroleum Authority's custody, and which are shown on the slide there, include geological, geophysical, engineering, health, safety and environment, costs, national content, surface and subsurface facilities data, in addition to some administration data. Now, in preparation for the responsibility of managing the country's oil and gas data, the Petroleum Authority of Uganda has completed setting up a state-of-the-art data center in Entebbe. This was completed in 2021. The data center is part of the National Petroleum Data Repository infrastructure, which will include a real-time monitoring center, a disaster recovery facility, and a seismic data transcription facility. The design of the real-time monitoring center commenced in 2021 and is due to be completed, and its construction commenced during this 2022, this year. The real-time monitoring center will provide a real-time information and enhance the monitoring of the drilling, production, and crude oil transportation. Everything happening outside will be received at that center as it happens. That's what it means to be real-time. Now, the design of a disaster recovery solution is, and its implementation are also planned to be concluded during this year, 2022. So that's the regulation of the petroleum data that is done by the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. The other area of regulation is the environment, health, safety, and social management. In this regard, the authority regulates environment, health, safety, and social aspects of the country's oil and gas sector, and this is done in collaboration with the other relevant government agencies. This is done with a view to ensure that the oil and gas activities in the country are undertaken safely and in a manner that does not harm people, the environment, and investments. Uganda's oil and gas resources are located in pristine environments. Those of you who have been to the field know it. Therefore, it's very important, there is an important need to ensure the desirable coexistence between the oil and gas sector and biodiversity in the country. The oil and gas activities in the country are not only being benchmarked on Uganda's environment legislation or frameworks, but they are also being benchmarked on international best practice standards. And we think this is being achieved and is being done in partnership with our colleagues. As I earlier indicated, the National Environment Management Authority of Uganda issued environment and social impact assessment certificates for the 3 major projects in the country, Kingfisher and ECOP, in March and December 2020, and earlier Tilenga in April 2019. The authority supported the process of approval of these environmental and social impact assessment by organizing public hearings. In the slide there, you can see the previous slide, you could see the NEMA handing over the certificate to Total for Tilenga. In this slide, which is on the slide now, it shows you the public hearings which the Petroleum Authority of Uganda organized as part of the process of approving the environment and social impact assessments by NEMA. These were done in the field, and they were done in the different parts of where this work is going to be done. Some of them were done in Nwoya, others in Bulisa, others in Hoima, and others along the pipeline route in Rakai and Mubende. The authority is now regulating the developers, that's the licensed companies, to put in place the required environment and social management plans to ensure that the conditions which the National Environment Management Authority attached to the environment and social impact assessment certificates and the mitigation measures are being implemented by these licensees. I'd also like to inform you that the authority, in partnership with the Office of the Prime Minister and the National Environment Management Authority, have put in place a National Oil Spill Contingency Plan, NOSCP. This NOSCP was approved by the Office of the Prime Minister in February 2021. This contingency plan is a national framework and command structure for planning, preparation, and response to oil spills. The National Oil Spill Contingency Plan and the related regulations require local governments and other lead agencies to develop oil spill contingency plans also. The authority, which is the competent national authority responsible for managing oil spills, is now working with the stakeholders to enhance their preparations, their preparedness to handle oil spills at the different levels. The other aspect of social aspects in the sector includes the acquisition of land, which many of you have heard about. Acquisition of land for the Tilenga, Kingfisher, and ECO projects is continued very well in 2020 and 2021. The land for the Tilenga industrial area was fully acquired with the 622 affected persons compensated. This compensation included handover of 30 residential houses to those primary residents who were impacted. In addition to handing over the houses, the companies implement livelihood restoration projects, and these projects are in agriculture, they are in vocational training, they are in business support, and in financial literacy. This is to enable the people who have been displaced to start or continue their lives with as little interruption as possible. Now, as part of the Tilenga project social amenities for the communities in Bulisa, social community amenities have been strengthened in Bulisa, and the ones that have been strengthened include the Kirama Water Project, which serves 5 villages in Bulisa district. They include the Avogera Health Center, whose construction commenced in March 2021 and is due to be completed in 2022. In addition to the Tilenga industrial area, acquisition of land for the other infrastructure like the pipeline and well pads is also progressing. At the end of 2021, 2,200 out of a total 4,300 affected persons had been compensated, and the construction of 31 out of the 184 expected resettlement houses had commenced. That is for the Tilenga project. For the Kingfisher project, acquisition of land for all the facilities for that project is almost completed, with 99% of the affected persons compensated. 3 resettlement houses were handed over in 2019, and the remaining 50 houses are expected to be handed over later this year. Handover of the houses in the Kingfisher project will be completed this year, 2022. CINOC, which is implementing the Kingfisher project, is also implementing different livelihood restoration programs for the people affected by the land acquisition. And this commenced in 2019 and continued during 2020 and 2021. These programs for the Kingfisher also include agriculture improvement, fish farming, business support, HIV literacy, and vocational training, among others. So the people in this area have actually been supported to resettle their lives after the project has affected them. That was Tilenga, and that was Kingfisher. Land acquisition is also ongoing for the East African Crude Oil Pipeline project, and this has progressed, and 85% of the people who are going to be compensated at least have been informed of how much money they are going to get and when they'll get it. This is called the disclosure, because before you start paying people, you go through a disclosure process and inform them that your land and your assets were valued at this amount, and this is what you're going to be paid. Over 85% of the people in the ECOP have now been disclosed to. They are now undergoing financial literacy, and we expect the compensation to be done during this year and completed. Financial literacy is very important because you really don't want these people to misuse the funds. So this has been the land acquisition aspect, and that is the social aspect of the environment, is the aspect of the climate change, and I thought I would share this with you. Many of you have heard about climate change and the extent to which it is expected to affect the oil and gas projects. As you can see on the slide there, oil and gas is still with us here for the next 30 to 40 years. And the reason for this is largely because of the expected, or actually not expected, it's already being seen, the growth of energy demand in the world, especially from the developing countries. The second one is the short supply of oil and gas around the world now. And the third one is the price of oil that you can see that is going up. These signs do not show that the oil and gas resources are going to become useless shortly. The anticipated period of time is 30 to 40 years as we proceed. Therefore, Uganda's projects, oil and gas projects, are still viable and they are still very valuable. And this is also important because we need to recognize that the renewable energy cannot replace all the things that oil and gas is providing for. You are aware that the aspects like tires, plastics, and other petrochemicals cannot be replaced by renewable energy. And so these are going to continue in demand. But that as it is, it's important for you to note that the oil and gas projects in Uganda are also being taken forward in a manner that recognizes the importance of climate change. And so, on the technical side of it, Uganda's oil and gas sector is being taken forward in a manner that reduces the negative impacts on the environment. For example, the gas from the oil fields will not be flared as a requirement by the law, but neither will it be used only for electricity generation, but it will also be used for production of cleaner liquefied petroleum gas. Using gas to produce liquefied petroleum gas is more environment friendly than using it to generate electricity. And so the Tilenga project has been adjusted to reduce the amount of electricity to produce, but to increase the amount of liquefied petroleum gas. And many of you are aware that forests are being cut down in this country, and LPG could certainly reduce the impact of cutting down these forests, and this is a major contribution to avoiding climate change. In addition, there are also plans to increase the use of solar energy in the oil and gas activities in the country, especially in the heating of the East African crude oil pipeline. So this is an aspect that is being taken forward. Oil and gas is still around, but as the projects are implemented, efforts are being made to ensure that the projects contribute to reduction of climate change. The other area of regulation of the sector is the growing the participation of Ugandans and Ugandan enterprises, which is often referred to as national content. The Petroleum Authority of Uganda regulates national content with a view to achieve optimal participation of Ugandans and Ugandan enterprises. The regulation of national content is done through employment, provision of goods and services, capacity building, enterprise development, and transfer of knowledge and technology. Now, in order to achieve the desired participation of Ugandan entities in the sector, you need to enhance the capacities of both the people and the enterprises in the country. This is especially necessary because the oil and gas sector is highly competitive. It requires internationally recognized standards and quality. And so there's no way the enterprises will be able to participate if they don't raise their standards to that extent. Some of the results that are being achieved in this regard, at the end of 2021, 74% of the people directly employed by the oil companies were Ugandans. And out of, on the average, 27% of the management positions were held by Ugandans, 64% of the technical positions were held by Ugandans, and all the support positions in the licensed oil companies were being occupied by Ugandans. The Petroleum Authority measures these and is happy to report that these actually represent progress. Now, when it comes to the supply of goods and services, 413 procurements worth $14 million were undertaken in 2020, and out of these, 382 procurements worth $12.9 million, representing about 92%, were contracted to Ugandan entities. From January to September 2021, our statistics to the end of December have not come in yet, Ugandans were able to provide goods and services worth over 48 million, about 50%, out of the total procurements valued at $91 million. And some of the services provided by Ugandan companies include human resource services, construction, agriculture and crop development, environment and waste management services, broadcasting services, housing, hotel accommodation, office rental services, security services, ICT accessories and services, education management services, insurance, vehicle hire, tracking and maintenance, medical services and equipment, together with legal services. So these are the areas where Ugandan enterprises have been able to offer services, and they are increasingly going to offer these services. In order to facilitate this process of Ugandan's participation, the authority put in place frameworks that are going to help this process. These frameworks include the National Supplier Database, and they also include the National Oil and Gas Talent Register, which are being put in place to support the development of the country's national content. Now, to support Ugandan companies, the National Supplier Database was put in place to support Ugandan companies who would like to participate in the sector. This National Supplier Database was set up in 2017, and it is a register of all entities with interest to supply goods, works, and services to the country's sector. Currently, 2,662 companies have been qualified and registered by the authority on the National Supplier Database. This is up from 513 in 2017, and you can see the graph there showing how that has grown. The services of the NSD are continuing to improve through IT and other aspects. It's important to note that out of these 2,000 and so entities on the NSD, 1,966 are Ugandan entities. And the others are entities from 48 countries outside Uganda. 48 countries is important because it shows you the interest companies in other parts of the world have in Uganda's oil and gas sector, to the extent that they can register on the National Supplier Database for the country's oil and gas sector. The Petroleum Authority of Uganda welcomes entities to register on the National Supplier Database so that they are able to provide goods and services to the country's oil and gas sector. Application and registration on the NSD are done online. You don't have to come to the offices of the PAU, and they are done on a 24/7 basis, round the clock. All entities on the NSD are required to confirm their interest to remain on the register after 3 years when they have been there. That's to avoid others which stop being companies and they remain on the register. The NSD is continually being improved, especially to quicken the process of registering applicants on the database. And this NSD has now been integrated with the Uganda Revenue Authority, the Uganda Registration Services Bureau, and the National Social Security Fund. In addition to the NSD, the Petroleum Authority has put in place the National Oil and Gas Talent Register, and this was established in February 2019. The objective of this National Oil and Gas Talent Register is to increase the visibility of Ugandan nationals who are interested in working in the sector. At the end of 2021, the National Oil and Gas Talent Register had a total of 5,941 registered people, or rather they call them talent. This NOGTR also had 114 employers. It's important to note that this register has both people who are looking for work, but it has also got companies that are looking for work. So it is these companies that we talk about being registered on the NSD. So they can quickly go in the talent that is on the National Oil and Gas Talent Register and pick stuff from there. There was a clear and significant increase in the registration of both people and companies after the launch of the projects in April 2021. A total of 193 jobs were posted on the system by the different employers who are on the system, and this provided opportunity for competent Ugandans to take up these jobs. Regarding the skilling of Ugandan nationals for business and employment opportunities, the authority partners with private sector and collaborates with other ministries, departments, and agencies of government. Some of the key partnerships are with the Ministry of Education and Sports, the Stanbic Business Incubator, Employment for Development Program, which is coordinated by GIZ, a German entity, and the Assessment and Skills Center and Skills Development Facility, and others under the Private Sector Foundation. As a result of these skilling efforts, which were undertaken through these partnerships, a total of over 4,500 Ugandans have been trained and they have acquired international industry certification, like City and Guilds, Engineering, Construction and Industry Training Board, American Welding Society, and OPITO. And this was at the end of 2021. In the diagrams there, you can see some of the welders training to acquire these certifications, and you can see the heavy goods vehicle driving being trained and at graduation. It's also important to note that all these certification centers, which were international, have over the last 2 to 3 years established centers in the country, except the American Welding Society, which we hope will also establish one in the country this year. This is a very significant step because it means these Ugandans who have got these certifications can now work internationally. First of all, they can work on the oil and gas projects in Uganda because in the past, before they received these certifications, they were not able to work on these oil and gas projects. But now that they have these certifications, there is no reason why the companies can't employ them. But in addition to that, these certifications enable them to work internationally. So many of you are aware that we have a lot of our young people getting on aeroplanes to go and do house help, to be house helps in the Middle East. It is the expectation of everybody that with this internationally certified training, hopefully the aeroplanes can now carry certified technicians and engineers to work outside the country, either in addition or in replacement to these people who are going to work as house helps overseas. I would also like to inform you that African Development Bank granted 500,000 US dollars to support the development of capacity of 200 micro, small, and medium enterprises along the East African crude oil pipeline. This project is going to be implemented by the Stanbic Business Incubator in partnership with Solid Rock Life and Business, also with Living Earth Uganda and Connexus Oil and Gas. The Petroleum Authority will supervise implementation of this project, and this project is expected to last 2 years. So that's a deliberate effort to develop 200 SMEs along the pipeline route. As an authority, we are glad to note that Ugandans have been able to provide goods and services worth over United States dollars 1 billion out of the total investment into the sector of 3.7 billion that entities that have provided goods and services to the oil and gas activities between 2017 and 2020. And this publication can be accessed on our website, www.pau.go.ug. Participation of Ugandan entities in the country's oil and gas sector is constantly being measured by the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, and all efforts are being made to increase the participation of Ugandan entities from 28%, which we have had in the exploration phase, to the 40%, which we are working to achieve during the development phase, whose investment is estimated to be between $15 and $20 billion. So if the country receives 40% of that 15 to 20 billion, you can imagine that that's a big boost to the economy. And it's important to note that this $15 to $20 billion is all going to be spent before the oil comes out of the ground. You see, most people we meet say, when is oil coming out of the ground? When is oil coming out of the ground? It's important to note that some of these opportunities are actually here before oil comes out of the ground. The final area of regulation, which the authority does, is related to stakeholder management. The Petroleum Authority of Uganda has and continues to establish strategic partnerships with national and international agencies. In the country, these agencies include the Uganda Revenue Authority, the Uganda National Bureau of Standards, the Uganda Registration Services Bureau, the National Social Security Fund, and the National Information Technology Authority, and the National Identity Registration Authority, among others. You can see them displayed on the slide there. And the picture there was an entry in an MOU with the Uganda National Bureau of Standards, which was done at the end of 2020. Our partnerships are not only in Uganda. The authority also works and plans to continue working with entities outside Uganda. The key one at the moment is the Energy, Water and Utilities Regulatory Agency of Tanzania, and this is especially to regulate EACOP together. The others include the Energy Regulators Association of East Africa. They include the Norwegian Petroleum Directorate, for which the government of Uganda has had a long partnership in the oil and gas aspects. They include the Petroleum Safety Authority of Norway and the United Kingdom Oil and Gas Authority, among others. We also have working relationship with the national content units in Nigeria, and also those are documented on the slide. In the picture there, the Honorable Minister of Energy, Honorable Nankabirwa, was receiving a delegation from the East African regulatory energy agencies who were led by the chair of the board, who is currently the chair of the PAU, Dr. Jane Mulemwa. So the authority makes a lot of effort to have these partnerships done as part of its stakeholder engagement. But stakeholder engagement isn't only in those partnerships, because the authority also engages the communities in the field, as you can see on the slide there. And we do this with partnerships in the media, radio, television, and there's been a lot of effort in having these efforts done both virtually and physically. Of course, physically, while maintaining the SOPs over these last 2 years that we are talking about, and utilizing broadcast media channels all over the Albertine Graben and along the pipeline route. And these channels are used to ensure that the flow of information to the public is maintained. This includes quarterly engagements in areas of operations and along the East African crude oil pipeline route. And these target district leaders, sub-county and village teams, together with civil society organizations, among others. The authority plans to intensify the provision of its services in the oil and gas operation areas, and in order to achieve this, the authority has opened regional offices in Hoima City and also in Bulisa District. The office in Hoima City, you can access it. I don't know whether we have journalists from the Albertine Graben here. It is on plot 6 Bukunya Road. And the office in Bulisa District, the district headquarters there has kindly lent us an office which we're using for the time being as the infrastructure in Bulisa improves to enable us get a separate office. The Petroleum Authority of Uganda remains committed to engaging all stakeholders through various channels, including social media and other digital platforms, through regular engagements and dissemination of publications. Now, as I conclude, I would like to share with you the extent to which what is happening in Uganda's oil and gas sector is an extremely important opportunity for the country. And I'll just bring it as an example. Many of you have heard about countries hosting the Olympics and countries hosting the World Cup. I'll use maybe the World Cup because it's most known by Ugandans more than the Olympics. The amount of investment, you know, whenever a country is going to hold the World Cup, you hear the excitement. They lobby, they prepare, they do what, and everything. But if you look at that graph, it shows you the amount of investment that countries which host the World Cup actually receive. And you can see most of it is much less than the amount of investment that is coming, that has begun to be invested in the country's oil and gas sector. And you will agree with me that probably not enough noise or not enough excitement has been generated in Uganda, although the country is sitting at an opportunity of the magnitude that you're seeing there. I was informed that I think Qatar is hosting the next World Cup. It is planning to build 8 stadiums, and the total cost of those 8 stadiums is about $6.5 billion. That's Qatar, and everybody's excited. But you can see Uganda, in the next 3 years, it's also going to receive almost 3 times bigger an investment. And so we need all of us to be aware of this opportunity and the fact that it is coming. Of course, Uganda is even more privileged because the investment that is being put in the oil and gas sector after the infrastructure has been built and all this money has been spent, the country will now start earning revenue from selling and utilizing oil. And I think the expected earnings there anywhere between $1 billion, $2 billion a year, depending on the price of oil. Whereas these people who invest in these stadiums, they just hope that maybe the sports fraternity will increase, more tourists will visit their countries as a result of the publicity. So I just wanted to say this to show the significance of the opportunity that this country has as the oil and gas sector truly kicks in. The other aspect of the sector, in the previous slides and in my presentation, you have seen the companies that are coming into the country to invest and to do the work. These are big companies. I think Total is a $150 billion company. CNOOC is anywhere between $50 and $80 billion, and so on and so on. These are the licensed companies. We then have the contracted companies. These companies, when you see them, they are $80 billion companies, $30 billion companies, $15 billion companies, $10 billion companies. These companies have entered into our economy, and they're here. You know how much effort the country used to make to go outside there to look for investors. Here you are. You now have these companies. You can say that they have now come to do work and earn and go, but it is up to us as a country to see how much and what we can get from these companies. But that's not only the ones coming from overseas. We also have the Ugandan companies that are actually benefiting from these projects. Almost all the engineering companies in the country, and that slide shows you some of the famous ones, they have taken contracts in the oil and gas sector in terms of hospitality, in terms of civil works, in terms of transport, in terms of IT, in terms of consultancy. And they are getting contracts that are bigger than they have been having in the past. So you can see the extent to which this is a very significant opportunity to our country. Now, as we conclude, of course, these opportunities are here, but we need to ensure, one, that we recognize that these are opportunities which are with us in the country. Two, we work very hard through capacity building and training and knowledge to ensure that we actually do participate in these opportunities so that they don't pass by. These investments are not going to be here all the time. After 5 years, they will have passed, and we will now be in the operation phase, and we don't want them to pass without us benefiting. Now, as I conclude, I would like to recognize really the support the Petroleum Authority receives from the key players in the country. And we need to start really by appreciating the guidance received from His Excellency the President, especially in this difficult time when the industry the agreements were being done. The authority has received support from the Minister of Energy along the way. The authority has received a lot of effort by its staff and all the partner institutions that I have mentioned previously. And so we are grateful that these people are supporting us. We are grateful to the investors that are investing in the country. And as the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, we are very excited by what we see. On the slide there, you can see the result of a partnership between oil and gas and land use planning. You can see what Bulisa was in 2015. You can see what Bulisa is beginning to look like at the end of 2021. And these things are happening very, very quickly. So we are delighted as an authority to be participating in this process that is leading to the transformation of our country. So with those few comments, I would like to thank you, and thank you very much for your time. I wish everybody a very happy 2022 as we live in these interesting times, as the Chinese usually say. Thank you very much, and that ends my presentation. I'll be glad to take on a few comments or questions from the media, if you have any, before we close down this briefing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. for the very informative presentation. We also have colleagues online, so after taking some questions here. Shall allow the others also communicate online. But also the entire speech or press release shall be shared with us. So most of the information, or all the information that you really need to benefit from is available in that briefing. Thank you very much. So let's take quick questions. You say who you are, the media house you represent, or what you exactly do, and then you keep it precise and concise for us to manage our time very well. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Who's going first?
Okay, either it was very clear and there are no questions, or it was not understood at all.
Yeah, here one.
Thank you, Mr. Ernest Rubondo. My name is Paul Murunji from Daily Monitor and NTV. I want to have a clarification on the issue of energy transition. We've seen that a lot of, around the world, we're having issues concerning oil and all fossil fuels and the issue of energy transition. Are we not likely to see a rise in cost of production and exploration for oil in Uganda as these companies take on energy efficient technologies? And maybe my second question will look at how can Ugandan companies harness joint ventures with foreign companies to participate fully in the oil and gas sector. And maybe is 48% that is required for Ugandan companies to enter joint venture not too much? That is something that has been raising questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Murung. I think those are very good questions. Any other that we have? We can go for those first.
Okay.
Thank you.
I did mention the energy transition. The energy transition is supposed to protect our universe, our environment, and all of us would like that. And all efforts are being done in the direction of achieving, actually the energy transition is to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that is going into the atmosphere. And a lot of effort is being made in that direction internationally, very good technology coming on. It's just that as all those efforts are being made, energy is a very important ingredient in people's lives. And so the need for energy has not stopped or has not reduced. So what is being done is to try and change from energies that produce carbon dioxide to energies that do not produce carbon dioxide. And that effort is ongoing. However, as I said, this is happening at the time when the demand for energy in the world is increasing, especially as a result of the developing countries. You can see yourselves the difference between the number of cars that were running on the roads in Kampala, and you can imagine that be happening in the other developing countries around the world. I can see sometimes the northern bypass used to look very big, but there are occasions you go there and actually find it full. So that energy demand is not letting the transition from the polluting energy sources to the non-polluting ones happen as quickly as the world would like. And that's what has created, that has provided a window for these energies to be taken out in a transitional way. And that's why it's called a transition. And we are seeing things in the transition. As you are correctly saying, there is a reduction, emphasis on reducing exploration of these polluting energy sources, coal, and so on and so on. It's also important to note that these energy polluting sources have been ranked. And I think coal is the most polluting. Then you go on to crude oil. Then you go on to gas is on the borderline. It is not actually considered the polluting one because of its cleanliness and so on. So as I said, given that scenario, oil and gas is expected to have another 30 to 40 years of life. It's also important to note that there are aspects of which energy, which oil and gas produces, which will not be produced by the renewable energies. I think the renewable energies will not make tires for you, they will not contribute to pesticides for you, they will not make bitumen for you, and other petrochemicals. So that aspect is also going to remain, and solutions for it has to be found. So the oil industry is working generally with the rest of the world to try and transition to a cleaner world. And most of the companies have changed their names, they have gone into renewable energy projects, and so on and so on. So indeed, as a result of that emphasis on reduction on investment, it could become expensive to find money to put in the investment. But at the same time, the people and the companies that were doing this work when there was full throttle of oil and gas are still available in the world. And if the activities of oil and gas reduce, it means they can provide their services at a competitive price. So you need to put all these factors into play and see where it lands you. But as I indicated, the oil and gas projects in Uganda are still valuable. They are very viable. The benchmark costs still are attractive. That's why the companies are investing in them. And Uganda will be able to benefit from its oil and gas resources in the next 25 to 30 years, as long as this is in place. When it comes to joint venturing, the legislation in the country actually encourages joint ventures between Ugandan companies and foreign companies. You are correct in that 48% in some joint ventures might be too big for Ugandan companies. But it's important to recognize that it's not only those big projects that exist. Ugandan companies can even partner in smaller aspects like training. I noticed some of the training firms in Uganda have actually got in partnerships with international companies. And so you don't have to focus on the ones that are big. For those who have muscle and have initiative, can try make effort on the big ones. But there is a lot of opportunity before you get to the big ones. And we can actually see Ugandan companies joint venturing with international companies in very many aspects, but in very attractive methods, including aspects like recruitment processes. Because the speed and quality of the people required by the oil and gas industry is very high, and the companies here which are doing recruitment, some of them have decided to partner with foreign companies in order to do it, but also to enhance their recruitment outside Uganda. Because these professionals, sometimes if the companies want professionals and they are not in Uganda, it's not correct that the Ugandan recruitment services companies therefore fold their hands. They should also be able to look outside and see if they can bring foreigners where they are necessary. And this has necessitated a partnership at that smaller level. So yes, the 48% can be difficult for big contracts, but there are many contracts that it can still be achieved. And we see a lot of Ugandans actually partnering with foreign companies very efficiently and very well. And we think that's the way to go to achieve technology transfer and also improve our skills.
I do have a question or two. Thank you so much for UBC TV.
Thank you. You need the mic?
Okay, no, I don't think so. I'm loud enough. Do I need? Okay, I'm Dennis Igua from UBC TV, and of course, Uganda we have set a target of a fast commercial oil production by the year 2025, mid 2025. Would you say are we still on track to achieving this target? And secondly, it's about the investment this year, in the year 2022. Which investment will you say in this year might take us closer to achieving these very important targets? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? There's one which came online of the $3 billion to be spent in 2022. How much of it will stay in country? I think that's how it sounded.
Okay. We are on track to 2025. Everybody, including the licensed oil companies and the different arms of government, are working towards having fast oil before 2025, actually at the beginning of 2025. And so, yes, that is on track. We have not had anything that sways or changes it. And so, yes, that is on track. You said which of the investments that are being made are most important or most critical to achieving fast oil. Well, I went through all of them, most of them. The companies that are on the ground clearing the site where the infrastructure is going to be built, certainly because those have to prepare the ground and leave, and then the ones who build come in. The company that is making the drilling rigs, which are going to be used to drill the hundreds of wells that are coming, I indicated that. That has also started designing the rigs. The acquisition of land where the infrastructure is going to be built is going on, and I indicated the progress that is being made there, the very good progress that is being made there. So those are like the critical ones. Of course, manpower, the training of Ugandans who will be participating in these things, but also the acquisition of facilities. I understand there is now a run on the facilities in Kampala in terms of offices and so on. We are lucky that Kampala actually has accommodation, has office facilities, which these companies can hire, so they don't have to set up as many fabrication centers. So those preparatory things are happening, and they're happening in a manner that is fine. The aspect of how much of the 3 billion coming in 2022, we are in a transition, because in the period of exploration and appraisal up to the end of 2021, we're looking at the country keeping about 28% of the investment in the country. The target that has been set now is that during the development and production, we would like to see at least 40% participation by Ugandans. So given the targets in place, I would take 40% of the 3 billion and say if that is achieved, then we'll have achieved the target. But I would like to assure you that really Ugandan enterprises and the regulators and even the licensed companies that are doing this contracting are all fully for national participation. They support it. I would not be surprised if the achievement is even higher than 40%. So it will be a good question to respond to at the media briefing at the beginning of 2023.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ernest Rubondo, and all the people who put forth questions. We've got our colleagues online. You can unmute them, and they can also pose their questions. Please, those online, can you go ahead and pose your questions? Say who you are, the media house you work for, and you keep your question or comment precise and concise. Thank you.
Martin Italy from the New Zealand. My question is largely on the cost monitoring and financial analysis, which is one of the mandates of the Petroleum Authority. It's been quite long since we got the status of the recovery of costs. You indicated that you work closely with the Office of the Auditor General on computing, and over time, the authority has continued to approve budgets for projects to go on, but we don't know the current stand on the recovery of costs. Kindly share with us,
Okay, thank you very much. I will start by informing you that I don't have the direct number off my head now, but these recoverable costs are computed on an annual basis. So at the end of the year, the Auditor General and the oil companies agree that of the amount you spent, this is the amount that is expected to be recoverable. It's also important to note that the Auditor General, because of the capacity aspects and so on, has been progressing very well in terms of documenting this, and is now catching up with the annual audits. I think they now are about 2 or 3 years behind, but for us who work with them, we appreciate that that's very good progress given where they came from, because this animal just hit them and they had to start by training people. And so the numbers they would have now that are sure and agreed with the companies would not be as at the end of 2021, but they would be at the end of maybe 2018, 2019. So there is that lag that is definitely not going to not going to continue because of the effort that I see the Auditor General putting in, and subsequently then we'll be able to have the recoverable costs maybe just 1 year behind. Currently, as I indicated, the amount invested so far is about $3.5 billion. Not all that is recoverable, because some of it is spent on things that are not acceptable as recoverable. We should be able to post the number as at the end of 2019, when the Auditor General has completed, has given it to us. It's important to note that actually when the Auditor General also makes this number available, they actually present it to Parliament. The Auditor General's report to Parliament is the one that has this number in it. So we would like to keep it that way, that the Auditor General presents their report to Parliament on the recoverable costs that have been accepted, and we have not yet got into a relationship where the Petroleum Authority of Uganda takes away their glory by announcing it. But we work with them very closely, and we'll ensure that a number like this can be put on their website regularly, so that people can know where we are in terms of what has been audited, and where we are in terms of which the recoverable costs that have been accepted. So I'm sorry I'm not able to give you the number directly, but we'll work to ensure that the entity responsible for that makes it available. You can see we talk about the amounts invested so far, because that's what the entity regulates, the authority regulates, but we hear you loud and clear. I think the recoverable costs are important for this country, especially now given the large amounts that are beginning to be invested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more? Could take 2 or 3 more, and then as we move to the end of the press briefing. Any more online?
Yes, my name is Ronald Musoke. I work with the Independent magazine. Thank you so much, Mr. Ibi. I have 2 short ones. One, if you could just help me define for me what entails a Ugandan company. This is in regards to the companies you just talked about, which at the moment are taking in the oil dollars are flowing in currently. And then the other question is, if you share with us the timelines for some of these projects you've been talking about, the three flagship projects. I know first oil is supposed to be in for 2025, but for instance, if you could just maybe tell me about the oil refinery. When do you expect it to be complete? Same for the ECOP, and then this other Chilenga and Kingfisher, briefly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The Ugandan company, and this is something that I will spend a bit of time on because it has a discussion. The Ugandan company in the regulations that we have is a company that is registered in Uganda, a company that employs 75% Ugandans, a company that buys Ugandan goods and services, and so on. Therefore, the concern people have been having is saying that a foreign company can come here and register at the URSB, and the URSB is very eager to register even foreign companies, and then it qualifies to be a Ugandan company and takes advantage of all the opportunities that have been provided by Ugandan companies for Ugandan-owned companies. And there's been a discussion on that aspect. And what the Petroleum Authority is doing is ensuring that the conditions that were put in place of the company employing 75% of its staff as Ugandans, of the company buying Ugandan goods and services are actually implemented and put in place. Why do we then give these companies that clearance of being considered Ugandan companies when they have that aspect? Because the national content aspects in Uganda are focused on the value addition. How much value is added to the Ugandan economy in this regard. So our understanding is that if a company is owned by an Israeli and it opens shop in Kampala and it employs Ugandans and it buys Ugandan goods and services and it introduces technology in the country, consideration needs to be made to appreciate the value that company is putting into the country and not try to isolate it. The discussion we have had, and this discussion is also being held between us and Tanzania, especially on the ECOP, is the aspect of a Ugandan company being one owned by a Ugandan. And some people have said that only companies owned by Ugandans should be the ones that qualify to be a Ugandan company. If you take into consideration the objective of national content, which is adding value, and just agree that this Ugandan company, the Ugandan could own the company, could get the contract, and then bring foreigners to do the work, and you sit back satisfied that you have achieved national content because the company that has been given the job is owned by a Ugandan. So that aspect of ownership only focuses on the profits being taken by Ugandans, but does not focus on the entire value that it can bring. And the example we usually give is example of the benefits that the Serena hotels have brought into Uganda in terms of introducing high quality hospitality, in terms of employing Ugandans, in terms of buying Ugandan goods and services. One would have to think very hard as to whether the Serena company is less of a Ugandan company than some other companies owned by Ugandans, which actually either don't add value or don't bring foreigners. So that is a discussion we are having. But for now, a Ugandan company is the one that is registered in Uganda, employs 75% Ugandans, and this employment goes into the different levels. It's not just the casual workers. There are descriptions for management, there are descriptions for technicians, and then the casual workers. And this company buys goods and services. So for us, from a regulatory point of view, that's where we have to regulate. That companies which are not owned by Ugandans, but are registered, actually are achieving the other requirements in order for them to qualify as Ugandan companies. And that's work that the authority is supposed to do. The authority has embarked on doing it, and I can see that we still have efforts to make it done, especially given the rate at which the oil companies are coming in, or rather the work in the industry is picking up. There was something about the timelines, and I think there was reference to the refinery. The refinery for now looks like it is slightly behind the other projects because, as I indicated to you, the other projects like Tilenga, Kingfisher, and the East African crude oil pipelines all have the environmental and social impact assessments approved by NEMA. These three projects have their front-end engineering and designs approved by the authority. And as I indicated for the refinery, they are in the process of undertaking their environmental and social impact assessment. They have just submitted their front-end engineering and design for the authority to approve. So if you look at it on the benchmark, the refinery is kind of lagging behind these other three projects. The other three projects, as you will appreciate, are very connected. You cannot say the pipeline has started when the oil fields have not started. You can also not say the oil fields have started when the pipeline is not there, because the oil will not have anywhere to go. So the three timelines for the three is the same. They all have to move in tandem. Just be aware that business operates differently. The people of the refinery could pick up their act and speed up very fast and conclude the environmental and social impact assessment and acquire financing as soon as their designs have been approved and probably catch up. The important thing is that the memorandum of commercializing the oil and gas resources in the country provide that the refinery will have 60,000 barrels of oil per day as a first take, and then the rest goes to the pipeline. So if the refinery comes on stream quickly, for one reason or another, it's 60,000 barrels of oil per day is already agreed. If the pipeline comes on place faster, the understanding in that memorandum of understanding of 2014 is that no project should hold the other. So the one that comes on stream first is the one that goes ahead. So in a nutshell, the progress these projects have made look like the refinery is behind them because it doesn't have an agreed ESIA. Its feed is not yet agreed, while the other companies cleared those a year or so ago, and they are now quickly concluding the financing aspects. Because after the designs are approved, the next stage usually is to confirm the financing. And the other projects are along those lines, and the refinery will get into those lines when its ESIA is completed. I think those were the two questions from Mr. Ronald Musoke, an independent, I think, journalist. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ernest. There are two other questions that came on board via online. One is, in as far as technology transfer is concerned, the question is, how is the Petroleum Authority of Uganda prepared to assist in bridging the gap that exists in Uganda? And then what happened to the land in Noya that the district offered for the development of a technical school? I think this is a passionate listener from Noya district. So those are the two so far.
Okay, thank you. Technology transfer happens in many ways. We did talk about joint partnerships. Technology transfer happens if the Ugandan companies are working with foreign companies. The Petroleum Authority requires that, looks into the joint venture that has been signed and ensures that the Ugandan company in there is not just being tagged along, but has specific responsibilities. So there is technology transfer that is happening in there. Some of the activities that are being done in the country, the authority has required that they are domesticated here. I think there are some tanks that are actually going to be prepared and welded in country. And somebody might say, but what's wrong with that? We've already been welding tanks here. But we are talking about tanks that are going to hold inflammable oil and gas. And the technology to do this, once they are done here, will have been transferred in the country. So that's another avenue of technology transfer. The other one is the employment of Ugandans. A lot of the Ugandans who are being employed by these companies, and the Petroleum Authority makes a lot of effort to ensure that these companies employ Ugandans even in the technical level. Our understanding that the Ugandans who work for these companies that are enumerated, and we are happy to have in Uganda, given their size, given their capacity, will acquire the technology that these companies are using as individuals. So we are looking at the individuals acquiring technology during the course of work. We are looking at enterprises acquiring technology as a result of joint venture partnership. And we are also looking at the international companies that are coming to do work here, establishing domiciliating centers in country that will lead to technology transfer. The companies here are also being encouraged to relate to the training institutions in the country. And we had a good example here of Shlambaja, one of the companies that is being contracted, when it set up a seismic data laboratory at Makerere University and equipped it with hardware and equipped it with the software. So technology transfer is happening in those many aspects, avenues, but it's something that the authority would be very glad to engage on with someone so that we can get more aspects of how quickly we can get this, especially because the opportunity for technology transfer is very, very big in these next 4 to 5 years. Nuoya, yes, the linkages between the oil and gas sector and the education sector did recognize that most of the people working are in the category of technicians, about 70%. The professionals with degrees are only about 10%. And so in this regard, the Ministry of Education identified areas in the country where they were going to set up these, the certification of technicians. And yes, Nuoya was one of the districts that was identified because it is in the Alberton Graben. But I think Nuoya did not have a technical institute ready. So the technical institute, I think that's why Nuoya provided land to the Ministry of Education so that this technical institute can be set up and then the certification put in there. I don't have off the tip of my hands how far the Ministry of Education has taken this, but I am aware that the district, yes, did give land, And I'm aware that the centers of certification are being distributed around the country, and Nwoya should and must have a chance because it's one of the districts in the district. So I don't know how far Ministry of Education has gone with Nwoya, but we can find out and bring it up in the engagements we have with the training institutions. I would also just like to tell you that the Petroleum Authority has worked with the Ministry of Education to set up an oil and gas trainers association. And this meets every month. And so they track the progress of capacity building in the oil and gas sector. And I think this aspect should be handled in the next meeting to see progress of capacity building at an institution to be developed in Nwoya. What I am assured of is that the institution has not yet been put in place because I have not had specific aspects of people training in that place. The last time I was in Nwoya, I actually found technicians being tested for certification at the district headquarters. I don't know where those are going to be trained, but certainly it was clear not at the institution. This we shall find out in our Oil and Gas Trainers Association we have with the institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our ED. I think we have got two last questions online. And then after that, we shall have, we have had a request, Mr. Ernest, for just a summary of a few things in Uganda for the benefit of other listeners, but that we shall share after the last two questions. Thank you. So the last two questions, please, online.
My name is Hussein Samuel. I work with Chemicals.
Not very clear.
My name is Hussein Samuel. I work with Chemicals. How many Tier 1 contracts have PAU so far approved, and out of these, how many are Ugandan companies? And maybe to be more specific, we would like to know, is motor engine Ugandan company, it's 2 contracts, what is its value in terms of US dollars? Thank you.
Okay, that's an interesting question, and it hits at the value of what we are talking about, national content. We haven't divided the values of the contracts the Ugandan companies are getting as Tier 1. But the first achievement we have is that, yes, there are Ugandan companies which have got contracts at Tier 1 level. There was a slide, and I don't know how quickly they can put it back, that showed the Ugandan companies that have got contracts at Tier 1 level. And these were in aspects of civil works. I recall Excel doing the civil works for the Kingfisher project. I recall Gulf Engineering doing the water systems at the Tilenga project. I am aware of ICS and New Plan, who are participating in the design of the East African crude oil pipelines. I am aware of MSL and GCC, which are providing hospitality and catering services. I am aware of Tech Lab, which actually did the geotechnical testing of the route of the pipeline and also the geotechnical testing of where the infrastructure is going to be put. I am aware of engineering consultancies like MBW and Kaga and Partners, who are consulting on these civil works, and so on and so on. I don't have the amounts and values yet, but we are impressed by the number of Ugandan owned, actually, because we can also talk about Ugandan but companies which are just registered. But the ones I'm talking about are owned by Ugandans. We are impressed by the number of contracts that they are getting, the magnitude of these contracts, and the size that they are compared to what they have been doing in the past. So we will be able to give you the numbers subsequently, but please be rest assured that it's very exciting, the amount of contract these Ugandan companies are getting. The areas where Ugandan companies are not getting contracts are clearly those which are very high technology, but even then the authority is required to push for joint venture, and only in circumstances where joint venture is also not applicable in some of those very special parts. I encourage that you take a visit, and the Petroleum Authority usually organizes visits for journalists so that you actually travel to the field and you see the beehive of activity being taken forward by these Ugandan companies. Most of you know them here in Kampala, their offices, their headquarters, and their cocktails, but it's very exciting and interesting to find them in the Graben now on the ground, rubbing their nose into the ground, doing this engineering work. And we're very excited because there is a circle we usually show where the most valuable work is in the center. And then as you get out of the center, the work becomes less technical and less valuable. We are beginning to see in Ugandan engineering firms now get contracts in the central part of the circle. And this means that value is coming through. As I said, the Petroleum Authority does measurement, and these are the aspects that we are now going to be taking forward. We should be able to say that for the Tilenga project, Ugandan companies have got this amount of money, and so on and so on. But just remember that this is still just happening and is beginning now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was the last one. There's just one last one, and then we go to the next. Please say it quickly.
Yes, my name is Libert Gwede from Uganda Radio Network. I was looking for an update on the sale of the crude that was extracted during exploration, the 40,000 barrels. And I want to know, why has it taken so long, 6 years? And what makes us sure that when we go into commercial production, it will be easy? I don't know. What are the dynamics?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, the fact that that crude is there and stored is a recognition of the extent to which the country is pursuing best practice environmental standards. Because in many parts of the world and in the past, crude oil like that would never have been there. It would have been flared as they did the testing. But the country has a no-flare policy. And that's why they said this crude oil should be put aside and use found for it, as opposed to flaring it and destroying our environment. So the priority was not to produce oil so that it is sold. It was actually a stopgap measure to ensure that the environment is not damaged. That's why that crude is there. But you're right. This crude oil has been in place for a long time. And the efforts to sell it have not yet yielded results. I must say here that the selling of that crude now is a commercial process. And as you are aware, the commercial aspects of the oil and gas sector are taken forward by the Uganda National Oil Company. So the Uganda National Oil Company is the one taking forward the process of selling that crude oil. The challenge you have had is that it is just 20,000 barrels of crude oil, maybe slightly more than that. And so you can't put in place a long-term transportation process for it. So the process you put in place for it to be moved to where it is going to be used is only a short term, and that increases the costs for its utilization. If it was a large amount, and you would be putting in place a process, for instance, if you are going to burn it at a heavy fuel plant, you would know that you are getting trucks which are going to move the crude oil to a heavy fuel plant, and you put that in place. But the fact that it is little, it means that if you bring trucks like those, here they will only be for that small amount, and they may not pay for that. That's one aspect. Secondly, the small companies here could have acquired it and used it maybe in burning tires and things like that. But there's a very strong consideration of health, safety, and environment, especially the requirements of the companies which produce that crude oil. It's important that where that crude oil is taken and utilized, the necessary health, safety, and environment conditions are all met. Because you know if there's something happens there, somebody will come and say, you can see the oil being produced in Uganda is already polluting, is already causing this and this a problem. So there is a strong health, safety, and environment requirement on the utilization of the crude. Now, with those aspects, it has rendered the economics of selling that crude oil not so attractive. And that's why it has taken a long time to get a buyer for that crude oil. But it's not a crisis that somebody is dying to sell the crude oil. The most important thing is that that crude oil has not polluted the environment. There is no doubt that once the activities begin, there will be more movement and there will be an opportunity to find somebody to utilize that crude oil. The others the companies that have been considered are like Hima Cement, for instance, to use it in its kilns. These factories that make bricks can also use it as to provide the energy to make the bricks. But when it comes into those safety requirements and the costs of secure transportation, most of them begin to find it unviable for their current operations. But the Uganda National Oil Company is a commercial entity. I have no doubt that they're going to find a commercial solution to getting rid of this crude oil. But certainly, I hope no one is feeling very hurt because the crude oil is in containers, because the bigger achievement is that it was not used to destroy the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for all the questions, and Mr. Ernest Rubondo for the vital responses and all the information shared. The last bit, as was requested, a summary of the sector achievements as was highlighted in Uganda for the benefit of other listeners. And then the other is the significance of the data, the developments of the data center and its significance in the sector. And the last one is the beneficial aspect regarding the $500,000 capacity building project that is funded by the African Development Bank. Just summary in Uganda, I think that will do. So this is
okay. Kale oluganda lwange munansonyiwa wenasobya naye kangezeeko ebigambo ebikwataganye n'enkulaakulana y'ebyamafuta mu Uganda bibadde bitwalibwa mu maaso okuva emyaka nga 5-10 emabega, naye nga kaakati eggwanga we lituuse bituukidde ddala eggwanga we litandise okufuniramu. Bannayuganda abasinga balowooza nti okufuna mafuta kijja kutandika ng'eggwanga litandise okutunda amafuta nga lifuna ssente. Weewaawo eggwanga lijja kufuna ng'amafuta batandise okugatunda, era okutunda amafuta kusuubirwa kutandika mu mwaka gwa 2025. Naye ekirala kye tulina okutegeera nti ng'amafuta teganatandikibwa kutundibwa kufuna ssente ezo, waliwo ebintu bingi ebikolebwa ebikwataganye n'amafuta ebirina omugaso omunene nnyo 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 mu ggwanga lyaffe. Ebintu bino birimu nga bannayuganda okukola emirimu, birimu nk'amakampuni ga bannayuganda nago okukola emirimu, mulimu nga abantu abagenda okujja mu ggwanga okukola ebintu bino abagenda okuva ebweru abamu, okugula emmere n'okukozesa amawoteeri n'emmotoka zaffe eziri muno bwe bityo. Kaakati ekiseera amafuta ga Uganda we gatuuse, ebintu bino kati bigenda kwetaagibwa. Ekyali kyabisibyemu ze endagaano ezaali zeetaaga okukolebwa wakati wa gavumenti ne kampuni zino ez'amafuta. Endagaano zino zaakolebwa omwaka oguwedde era ne zimalirizibwa bulungi. Kampuni zino ezaakwasibwa omulimu gw'okusima amafuta zaasalawo okutandika emirimu gino mu ggwanga, era nga kino nakyo kyasalibwawo mu mwezi ogwokuna omwaka oguwedde. Kaakati kampuni zino bwe zaasalawo okutandika okukola emirimu gino mu ggwanga, ne zitandika okunoonya kampuni za Uganda n'abantu bannayuganda be ziyinza okukola nabo, ng'era kino kigendera ddala mu maaso. Waliwo bannayuganda abafunye emirimu bangi mu kampuni zino ate nga kitandika butandisi. Mulimu bannayuganda abafunye emirimu mu kampuni ezifunye nazo emirimu. Kuba kampuni zino zirimu emitendera esatu. Mulimu kampuni ziri ezaasayininga endagaano ne gavumenti okunoonya n'okusima n'okutunda amafuta. Ne mbaamu kampuni endala eziweebwa emirimu, katugambe ng'okuzimba ebizimbe oba pipelines. Ne mbaamu ne kampuni endala eziweereza ebintu ng'emmere, eziwa emmotoka, eziwa transport. Kati emirimu gino gyonna gitandise ate gitandise mu bungi era n'amaanyi. Guno omwaka ogwa 2022 kisuubirwa nti obuwumbi 3 obwa $, bwe bugenda okukozesebwa mu mirimu gy'amafuta mu Uganda ezigenda okuva ebweru. Kaakati mukimanyi bulungi nti esente ezisigibwa mu Uganda zonna bw'oba ozigasse wamu, sirowooza nti waliwo omwaka ogwali guwezezza obuwumbi 2. N'olwekyo ekyo kya kintu kinene nnyo, kubanga kitegeeza nti esente ezigenda okusigibwa mu mirimu gino kati zitandise zigenda kuweebwa. Waliwo bannaffe abaali mu bitundu ebintu bino mwe bigenda okuzimbibwa nga bagenda kusengulwa. Abantu abo beetaaga okusasulwa, abalala abaagala bazimbibwa amayumba. Abantu bano batandise okusasulwa. Projekiti ezimu ng'eya Kingfisher kumpi bonna banaatera okubamalayo. Projekiti endala eri e Buliisa balinga wakati, ne projekiti eya pipeline nabo kati bamaze okubabuulira emiwendo gye bagenda okubasasula, bakyabayigiriza enkozesa ya ssente, enkwatamu ya ssente. Kati n'ogwo omulimu ogusasula abantu abadde mu bitundu bino ebigenda okuteekebwamu ebyuma bino nagwo gutambula gugenda mu maaso. Ebintu ebikwatagana n'ebyobutonde nabyo gavumenti ebikwasaganya bulungi, kubanga bwe mmanyi tulina ekitongole ekikulira ebyobutonde NEMA. Kampuni zino ezigenda okukola emirimu zagenda mu kitongole kino ne zisaba olukusa, era nga bwe yamala okwekenneenya nnyo ebiwandiiko byabwe, NEMA yabawa olukusa olw'okutandika okukola emirimu, ng'emaze okukakasa nti engeri gye bagenda okukolamu emirimu gyabwe tejja kukosa butonde bwa ggwanga. Kati nga bannayuganda twetaaga tulinde amafuta lwe ganaava mu ttaka tutandike okufuna ssente ez'okugatunda. Naye tetwetaaga kulinda ekyo kyokka, twetaaga okwenyigiramu, okumanya emirimu gino giriwa, tugifuna tutya, era abagenda okukolamu nabo bakola batya. Ekitongole eky'amafuta Petroleum Authority kitaddewo emikutu n'emitendero abantu bannayuganda aba bulijjo mwe basobola okumanyira bino. Waliwo database gye bayita National Supply Database egendako kampuni ezaagala okukola emirimu mu mafuta. Weeri yatandika mu mwaka 2017, kaakati eriko kampuni ezisukka mu 2500. Waliwo ne database endala egendako abantu abanoonya emirimu mu mafuta. Zino zonna osobola okuzisanga ku mikutu egya Petroleum Authority n'oapplyinga. Eno eyo egendako abantu abanoonya emirimu eriko abantu nga5000 n'okusukkamu kati. Kati abantu bagendako, eyo eriko ne kampuni ezinoonya abakozi. Kati Petroleum Authority ebyo n'ebitadde mu nkola olw'okwagala nti bw'oba oyagala okukola mu mafuta, oba oyagala kampuni eyagala noonya omulimu mafuta, tekikwetaagisa kujja ku ofiisi ya Petroleum Authority. Naye ogenda bugenzi ku mikutu egyo ne weeyanjula n'oregisteringa. Buli wabaawo omulimu oguwetaaga okukola ne bagussa mu mawulire, baguteeka ne ku mikutu egyo. Naye nga kikyetaagisa bannayuganda abantu baffe balina okuteekamu okufaayo mu kintu kino, balabe nti banoonyereza, bagenda ku mikutu gino ne banoonya information eno ne basobola okukola business. Petroleum Authority of Uganda n'ebitongole ebyali bikola amafuta mu Uganda atunuulira omudumu gw'amafuta ogenda okuyita Tanzania gye genda okuyita, naye nga ne ofisi ne baba tebannaziteekayo, authority ebadde egenda mu bitundu bino netuula n'abakulembeze, netuula n'abakozi, netuula n'amakampuni agaliyo, era nga kino kireese enkulaakulana mu kitundu kino, abantu abamu batandise okujjumbiramu. Naye kikyetaaga okwongeramu amaanyi okulaba nti ekintu kino kitambula, kigenda mu maaso. Waliwo ebintu ebirala bingi gavumenti byekoze okulaba nti eyamba bannayuganda okusoma, okuyiga ebyetaagisa n'amakampuni, okulaba nti omukisa guno teguyitawo. Kaakati mu byonna buli awuliriza sibimazeeyo nga bwe nabadde mbyogedde, naye kyetaaga abantu bamanye nti ne bw'oba olinze amafuta gave mu ttaka, gavumenti etandika okufuna ssente, ekyo kyokka tekimala. Kyetaaga onoonye, owulirize biki ebigenda mu maaso kati by'osobola okufunamu nga n'amafuta tegannajja mu ttaka, tegannava mu ttaka. Ate nga weebiri bingi binene nnyo. tukigeraageranyiza ne kampuni ezimanya n'ensi ze bateekamu guno omupiira ogw'ensi yonna. Ensi ezo bwe tugenza okulaba ssente ze zifuna nga zitegeka omupiira ogw'ensi yonna, kabe kasinge teziwera kitundu ssente Uganda zegenda kufuna ng'etegeka ebintu by'amafuta bino. Kati olaba okusanyuka n'okutegeka okubeerawo ng'ensi egenda okuhostinga omupiira ogw'ensi yonna, yengeri yeemu ne Uganda gy'erina okwetegeka okulaba nti ebintu by'amafuta bino abannayuganda beenyigiramu ne kampuni zigenda mu maaso. Bagambye nti waliwo projekiti ekolebwa ku omudumu gw'amafuta gye gugenda okuyita. Kituufu banka eya African Development Bank yawa Uganda small and medium enterprises obuli mu bitundu ebyo omudumu gye gugenda okuyita. Kampuni buno bwetaaga buzimbibwe, bwetaaga bufune emirimu ku mulimu guno ogw'okuzimba omudumu, ng'era ekyo kigenderera okukolebwa mu myaka 2 egijja. Projekiti eno yatandise, kampuni egenda ogikola eya Stanbic Bank n'endala eya Living Earth n'endala eya Solid Rock, kwe kampuni zakwataganya ne Connexus. Petroleum Authority yakwasiza omulimu ogw'okulaba nti obukampuni obwo obutono obuli mu kkubo omudumu guno gye gugenda okuyita tebufiirwa, emirimu tegibuyitako, era nga tusuubira nti kijja kukolebwa. Bonna awamu beetaaga obukampuni bwa project yeetaaga erage nti kampuni obutono bwa size eyo 200 mu district omwo omudumu mwe gugenda okuyita bubanguddwa ne bufuna contract kuno. Kati tujja kuba tukikola, era Petroleum Authority ejja kuba ekibannyonnyola nga bwe kigenda mu maaso. N'abali mu district eyo bajja kuba bawongera okulaba Petroleum Authority nga bwe babadde bagirabanga ejja, naye kati tujja kwongeramu. Kati ebyo bye nsobola okwogerako mu Luganda, tebyenkana na biri byonna ebibadde mu Luzungu, naye ka press release kano bagenda kukabawa buli omu akafune. Abaagala okukassa mu Luganda mujja kufuna omuntu amanyi okuvundula n'ateeka mu Luganda, toza kijja kusobola okubayamba okukategeera. Mwebale nnyo, mwebalire ddala ebiseera byammwe.
Thank you so very much. And this marks the end of our press briefing. We're very glad for the patience and everything. There is a snack for all of us in the next boardroom where our colleagues were. But for any further inquiries and information, please feel free to contact the authority via the corporate affairs at pau.go.ug email that has always been shared. Thank you so very much. And I wish all of us journey masses, and we continue working together.
Thank you very much.